Okay, guys, we are here with another episode. All right, we are unfucking your wrist today, okay? We have gone through the entire body, from the ankle to the knee to the hip to the low back again, or was it the hip that we did twice, to the shoulders, to the elbows, and now we are on to the wrist. This is super important, people. If you have missed any of the other episodes, please go back and check them. If you have any questions, please reach out to Dr. Arnika or I at Resilient Spine. And at Thai Training, obviously, you're here. But we want to make sure that you know that general prescriptions, right? General thoughts on introduction to dealing with injury, right? Right, Doc?
Right.
This is just this. Whatever it is I said, I'm right. So
Exactly. I agree.
I'm reiterating the fact that what we talk about on here is not what you might specifically need, right? These are general broad strokes of how to deal with injury or irritation within the joints. But if there is something specific going on, the people need to reach out, right?
Exactly. We got to reach out and get assessed. Yeah.
We got to reach out. Okay, we are talking about the wrist, right? This little doohickey right here can wreak havoc, okay? Wreak havoc, right? So let's not ignore it. It's basically the ankle of the upper body, right? We know we have like two of everything, right? Ankle of the upper body. There's a lot of bones in here, 8 little ones, right? All located right in there. They can get all fucked up. There's also just tendons that run through there, and a lot of times stuff just lands in the wrist. So we're going to talk about what might be going on and how you can start addressing it. So, Doc, how do we even find out if our wrist is fucked up?
We got to first check our full range of motion. So we spend so much time in like a flexion and extension, but there's also, we go inward in ulnar deviation and radial deviation. And some people don't even train this movement. So making sure that we check all of our ranges of motion.
Yep. And then what about above and below? Or above and below. Above, right? Like, so what's
Definitely
going on?
that elbow, shoulder? That shoulder, huge.
What's going on at the elbow? What's going on at the hip, right? Like, it can come from anywhere, right? The wrist is one of those really special joints that a lot of times the pain and the irritation just lands there, right? And it could be something else completely happening. The wrist, the elbow, a lot of times the irritation just lands there and it's something else going on. So the most important thing is to do a full body assessment. Absolutely. So flexion, extension, radial deviation, ulnar deviation. And then what about at the forearm? Should we chest supination and pronation?
We definitely got to check pronation and supination. Yeah.
Absolutely. Always assess the range of motion. See what's going on. See if you're actually deficient in a range or if you're just needing stability, right? Okay, what about neurological things? Should we address for neurological?
Oh, yes, that is huge. I'm working with a client right now who desk worker, works all day at the desk, and has been experiencing carpal tunnel, like the infamous scary carpal tunnel syndrome.
That good old diagnosis of carpal tunnel.
Exactly. Gotta love it. Exactly.
Might not be the tunnel at all.
At all. So she was coming in with some wrist stuff going on, like some numbness and tingling, and it is actually coming from her neck. So we talk about how we got to assess above and below. So at times we experience some of that numbness or tingling or pins and needles, all of which are issues or some symptoms of neurological symptoms. And then we can start by looking at the wrist because we do have a tunnel called our carpal tunnel.
It is there.
Nerve exactly. It's there. And I'm like, but that's where it's supposed to go.
Right.
It's supposed to go through the tunnel.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, most of the time I've seen people just get broad stroke carpal tunnel diagnosis. And I mean, have they looked at your carrying posture? Have they looked at your mechanism of injury? Was it 6 months of overhead lifting that got you into that position? Because then maybe it's not the tunnel at all, right? Like, it's just, you know, can we relieve the irritation and release you from that positioning and then relieve that stress? Or are we just going to go in there and cut it, right? Like,
right. Or maybe you just have a lack of range of motion because we spend so much time in one, maybe your wrist just doesn't go the other way and we're compressing against that nerve all day. So something as simple as increasing your range of motion can change the effects you feel in that carpal tunnel.
Take the time, take the 6 months to undo something that may have caused the irritation. Absolutely. There's also numbness and tingling that you can get into your, you know, like third, fourth, and fifth fingers, right? That's huge. And that's usually stemming from something higher up on the chain, right? The whole bundle of nerves goes through your brachial plexus, right? It just lands and separates through your arm on the way down. But that pinch could be happening way up here. So don't just think that if it's hurting or numb or tingling down here, it's coming from the wrist. There's a whole lot of other things it's got to go through before it gets there.
Exactly,
Okay?
exactly.
Yeah, it just lands there. I can't state that enough. It just lands there. Okay,
Exactly.
so could be coming from the neck. What about grip strength? Hugely
Grip strength
important.
is huge, definitely, definitely. And we also have like some pincher grip strength. How we're holding things plays a huge role. Oh, I feel like you're about to say something about the
No,
pincher.
I just love that. I love it because this indicates something. This indicates something else. And you have to be able to do that with all of your fingers. This is what we teach children, like babies, right? How do they pick up things? Like make them work with little things that we need it too. And sometimes if you test yourself out, you'll be like, holy shit, that's actually really hard. Well, that's something you need to work on. And it's also, can you resist that? Can you keep that tension and maintain that top of the fingers position and doesn't fall to this? That's actually a huge thing that you need to work on. And then a lot of my Olympic lifters, right? Can they establish a hook grip? Is this comfortable for them? Are they not used to it? Then start getting used to it. Can they get a full grip on the bar? Are they weak there, right? That's going to impact the whole chain of events up your arm, put increased stress on your shoulder capsule, everything. So developing and maintaining and establishing a good grip, huge.
Super important.
Huge. Yeah, pushing and pulling. I'm always yelling at people. I'm like, grip that shit. Put it in your
Right.
palm, right? How do you make everything a full body exercise? Let's start with the grip, right? Like that's hugely important. All right, and then what about extensor strength, right? We're talking about finger flexion. What about extension, right? I grab
Yes.
I
I don't
grab
have one.
I grabbed my rubber band. I literally ran out of the office and came back and I was like, I need my rubber band, right? So how do we test and establish extensor strength as well, right? It's not just about gripping. It's about opening up and making sure that all these tendons here, mine pop out, are nice and strong as well. So yes, grip strength and extension.
I want to add to that and watching your wrist positioning when you are doing those wrist
Yep.
extensions, because we tend to cheat and then we flex our wrist. I'm like, yeah, I can do this all day, but I'm like,
Yep.
you're not engaging this entire
Yep.
arm. So making sure that that wrist is as straight as we can. We can also train in different movements, but making sure that that wrist is as straight as we can starting off.
Yep, absolutely. And I also have another one that I talk about with like the figure eights. We'll talk about that when we go to unfuck it up. But yes,
Yeah.
so what about trauma? So there's two different types of trauma or two different types of mechanism of injury. There's acute and chronic, right? So acute injury would be I fell.
I just fell. Right. Exactly.
I
I
was
fell.
busting
And what
my
we
ass. My
all
wrist
do,
is
we
all
grab
busted
that
up.
hand to catch ourselves.
Yes.
Even though 1,000 times
Yes.
you learn, just roll it out. Don't catch yourself.
Yes.
But it's definitely a innate thing. So
Yes,
we tend
exactly.
to land right on our wrist to stop us.
Yep. Fall on an outstretched arm. Boom. It's either going to mess up your wrist or it's going to mess up your elbow or it's going to mess up your shoulder, but it's going to mess up something, right? So yes, fall on an outstretched arm, but then there's also chronic mechanism of injury, right? And that's what we were talking about earlier. Your carrying posture, how you sit. Have you been catching your clean super low and stressing your wrist out? Have you not been fully gripping the barbell or the dumbbell or the pull-up bar? Like what type of micro traumas have you caused over the course of your athletic career or over the course of your desk jockey career that have impacted the health of your wrist, right? So what type of trauma have you caused? All of this is important, figuring out how to then treat it, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right, so is it fucked up? We found out it's fucked up. How do we unfuck it up? Doc, what can we do?
First thing I like to start with always, I get people are wrist cards. And we can do them differently. We have some, we can put something on the palm, like on our, not palm, on our forearm, so we can be able to move our wrist around in different directions, all around. But something that I actually started doing a couple of weeks ago is, and you may like this, grabbing a ball and having that grip strength to develop tension. It feels so better. It feels different, and I like it a lot. So having something to grip while you're taking your wrist around in a slow and controlled range of motion, and make sure you're feeling everything.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan in bringing more muscles to the party, right? So it's kind of like, holding onto or doing banded squats, right? Like let's put that band around your knees. Now you create tension and you go through that range. You're just recruiting more muscles. So yeah, I love it. Grab a ball. You can also brace your forearm on like a bench or a desk or something so that you're not cheating and not getting this range from your elbow or your shoulder. It's just coming from the wrist. So how do you stabilize above so that you're just getting that range here? Absolutely. And doing it with the closed fist, doing it with the extended fist, like how many ways can we get through that range? The more you do, the happier your joint's going to be. Period.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, cars are huge, right? And you can do that first thing in the morning, or you can do it all throughout the day, right? You can't really overdo it.
Right.
You ain't gonna get an overuse injury from doing cars. You're okay.
Right.
Do as much as you want. That's fine. We'll let you go with that one. All right, train in all directions. So it's not just up and down, side to side. It's figure eights. It's writing the alphabet. I love doing that, writing the alphabet, uppercase, lowercase. That's what I always prescribe for ankle injuries. Great for the wrist as well. Can you do it with a banded resistance, right? All of those things.
Uneven, if we can do stuff with the uneven, I don't know what it's called. I don't think they make baseballs that are that small, but even just a dowel rod and going in that radial and ulnar deviation and seeing if you can control that and eventually working up to weight. And that's something like that is small weights or resistance bands because we don't need that much, just being able to take us through that range.
Yep. Yeah. Or holding one end of a dumbbell. It doesn't take a lot of load. And if you just lengthen the lever, then it's going to be harder, right? So you can get even a broomstick. And if you hold it really high up to the top, then it's nice and light. If you make that lever longer, it's going to be heavier. There's also a really good thing that you can do. And this is a special test where you tuck your thumb and then you go into that ulnar deviation.
Finkelstein.
Yes. So if you get that zinging sensation up, I mean, I get it a little bit too, but if you get that zinging sensation, then it might behoove you. That's a fancy word right there. It might behoove you to start trying to get into that position. If you struggle with the hook grip, for my CrossFitters, that might be a limiting factor for you. Your nerve might be just pissed off. And so it might be a good way for you to start challenging that range, right? Okay, nerve flossing.
Yes, there's so many of them.
Big fan.
I'm a huge fan of nerve flossing, and there's definitely different places that we can start. But one of the biggest things that I notice, and I start feeling small when I like to see where that nerve is affecting them along the way. So depending on what nerve, if you're affecting these two fingers, these three, or the back of the hand, would depend on what kind of nerve flossing we can do. But yesterday I was working with a wrist client, and I started really simple by just having them flex their wrist back, pronate, and just have them feel that tension right here before we even start adding in other joints. Because if this is already too much, the more we add in an elbow, it's only going to start to feel and exacerbate that pain.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Start within a range that it's like, because we want a slight discomfort.
Right.
It should not be painful. It should be accessible. And if you do too much too soon, I mean, you're just confusing that nerve anyway.
You're gonna light it on fire. Exactly.
Yes,
then you're gonna be like, you gave me this glide and it hurts, but we were supposed to start simple.
Yes, exactly. So do what you can and work within the capacity that you have with the goal of then advancing to higher things. Absolutely. But nerve flossing, I mean, median nerve gliding, ulnar nerve gliding, like, can you, okay.
Right. I can. I can do it with this one. I can do it with this one. Yes.
You know how hard that is? So,
it is super hard.
And test it out. Like, you might be irritated on one side, test out the other side. Do you see how uncomfortable it is? Great. All right. Well, then that's something you need to attack, right? Nerve flossing is huge. Nerve glides, whatever you want to call them. You can Google them. Medial, radial, ulnar. That's it, right? Okay.
Yes.
I'm like, okay. I'm like, pretty sure I got those. Pretty sure those are all. Okay. Joint mobilizations. This is huge. And I meant to talk about this in the beginning, right? So when you assess your range of motion with the wrist, you want to try to figure out whether it's a pinching sensation on the top that you feel, or whether it's a stretching sensation on the bottom. Those are going to be treated differently, right? So what do we do if there's a pinching sensation on the top when we're trying to get into full wrist extension?
I like joint moves for that to help it move.
Pretty much.
Yeah. That shows we got some structure stuff going on. Exactly.
Right, exactly. There's some compression things going on there. So you either grab a band or you get a chiro to help you out there, right? So you got to increase that joint space and allow those structures a little bit more space to move. If you feel that stretching sensation here, then the musculature is pretty, we can work on that. That's stretching, right? But that pinching sensation, there's banded wrist mobilizations that you can do. They're all over YouTube. They're on my YouTube at Thai Training. And these are going to be really important. But I will say, if you do have that pinching sensation, it's going to take a while, right? Like, we are now trying to create more joint space. That shit takes time, right? You gotta be patient, and you have to do it consistently. All right. What about banded finger exercises? We talked about some of those, right?
Yep.
Hugely important that we stay within that bent finger position too, right? Like, we don't want to just be like, right? The tendons go all the way to the end of your fingers. So we want to make sure that all of those are working well, right? So we want that flexed finger position. This one's tight as we're pushing out. I'm hurting, right? And so then we can also open up and then like we were talking about before, go through
Mm-hmm.
that range of motion of, you know, the wrist is capable of so many ranges. So let's challenge it in all those positions. I will say all those desk jockeys, this is going to be huge for you in sparing your
Yeah.
carpal tunnel. Let's work on that extension. Let's save all those tendons, right? Really, really, really good for you.
I have all my clients that are working from their desk keep their hair dryer, rubber band just on their wrist. And while you're
Huge fan.
working and you're sitting there brainstorming, sit here and chilling. You'll be surprised that a couple minutes a day can change how that wrist feels.
It's hugely important, absolutely, and you gotta do it bilaterally. You might as well. Let's just do both of them, right? One might be more irritated than the other, but hey, you're there anyway. Might as well. So yeah, floss and strengthen, floss and strengthen. Boom, all day.
Done. I want to see y'all in those Zoom meetings. Like, yes, don't worry about me. I'm strengthening.
Awesome, strengthen. All right, so what about posture, right? Is that going to have an impact on our wrist?
Posture is huge. Like we talked about assessing above and below. One of the biggest things when people come to me with any type of numbness or tingling down their arm, even if it's landing in their wrist, I'm checking their neck. And 9 times out of 10, we got this going on.
Right.
And if that brachial plexus, those nerves come from here and they're constantly being compressed, we don't know where it's being, we just happen to be feeling it in our wrist. So we have to make sure as close as we can that our ear is as lined up over our shoulders as we can. So we have that, that feeling.
I get that sexy double chin.
Yes.
Important.
I tell everyone, you got to have that double chin.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's no point in doing all of these exercises and everything if you're just going to fuck it up by letting that forward head posture happen, right? Like, and it's just, you just got to address it. And you have to constantly think about catching yourself being out of position. And I tell clients all the time, I'm like, look, you're going to catch yourself over and over and over again in the beginning. But then one day you're going to be like, I just tried to correct my posture and girl was already sitting upright, you know, like you're gonna be like, wow, I finally did it, you know, and then little by little you're gonna be like, oh, okay, I really have adjusted how I'm sitting. Like you'll sit differently in the car, you'll sit differently standing up in line, whatever, you know, like, and it just will start to become a more natural position. But unless you're very, very proactive about it in the beginning, it's not gonna change. It's just not gonna change, right? And there's no point in doing all the other stuff if you're just gonna fuck it up sitting at your desk. Or all day long, right? And sleeping as well, right? How do you sleep?
Yes. One of the biggest things, we got to the end of care when I'm working with this client with the wrist and all this is feeling good. And then she's like, my wrist hurt me the most, or they go numb when I wake up. And I asked her how she sleeps. I determined she sleeps like this, wrist curled up.
Straight out of the womb.
Straight out of the, just
straight
like this. And I'm like, well, that's the first thing we need to change. If we do all this lengthening and stretching to get this nerve gliding and moving, and then we literally revert everything we just did because we sleep 8 hours like this.
Right. And that's hugely challenging to change as well, right? Like there are certain positions that it's called the fetal position for a reason, right? Like our bodies are used to being there. It's very comfortable. It feels safe. But if it's causing irritation, you're sleeping with your hand underneath you like this, or you're sleeping with it tucked under or whatever, then we need to address it. And you need to work really, really, really hard at changing that sleep position. If it's fucking you up, you're going to have to change it, right? Got to change it. Just so hard. All right. What about stability exercises? Huge fan. Huge fan, right? So I always dose in single arm planks, right? If my clients can get into that wrist extension position, single arm planks all day long. Let's work on that whole chain of stability. And then I have them do it on the dumbbell as well. Can they grip that dumbbell and stay in that single arm plank position? And then I know you brought up a good one.
Yes. I love doing that dumbbell stuff. All I have are kettlebells right now. So anytime that I can do a bottom up, when I can just hold and grip that kettlebell, I do it a lot because my wrists are involved in what I do every single day. So I'm constantly working on wrist stability. So I love having that kettlebell.
Yep, the bottom up hold or bottom up presses, right? So the goal is to have the external load of the kettlebell and then you're holding onto the handle. So your grip, you got to squeeze the shit out of that, right? In order to stabilize it. You also, if you go into that pressing pattern, which is why I really love it, it forces you to do a better pressing pattern because if you are out of position, that kettlebell is going to fall, right? So if your wrist instability or pain is being caused by shoulder instability, that bottom up press is going to address it, right? Like it's just going to help fix it. So again, on my YouTube channel, all over it, I talk about, I love bottom up presses. That's the first thing I dose in for any shoulder, elbow, wrist. I'm like,
Right. I'm
there
like,
you go.
I can do it bottom up. Let me do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have minimal load, right, like that's a way to make a lightweight feel a lot heavier. A lot of times people will have a very hard time just even holding it, right? Can you just grip it and keep it there? Don't try pressing if you can't just hold it there, right? Like, let's work on the basics. All right, so yeah, the bottom up and those stability exercises are going to be huge. You can also work on stability with pronation and supination, with banded resistance. Is it a coordinated move, or are you being all clunky? You know, like the band is really good for weeding that out and exposing, you know, weaknesses in the range of motion, right? The band will rock and roll on you a little bit. So really great. Got to stabilize. All right, so how do we not fuck it up again?
We have to move our wrists. We do all this. Honestly, that's as simple as that. I tell like the desk workers that I work with, like, you're still going to work for 8 hours. And if you think that just doing a minute of this a day is going to help, it is going to do a little bit, but we have to be consistent in doing more range of motion throughout the day. So things we mentioned, like the wrist cards, like the grip strength, like the rubber band, those are things we can do while we're sitting. And that's the only way we're going to start to open up and get our wrists moving.
Yeah, I mean, and then we've talked about this in all the other lives. Don't unfuck it up and then fuck it up again by not keeping it up, right? Like whatever led you to the point of pain is not miraculously gone once your pain is gone. Pain is the last symptom to show up and the first thing to go away.
To leave, yes.
That's it. But you still got to stay on it. And if you have these things that you constantly, these positions and habits that you default to, then you're going to be at risk for a long time, right? So you have to keep it up. It might not have to be 5-6 days a week, like when you're in like really good rehab mode, but you got to keep it up at least 3 or 4 days a week. Or if you know you're sitting at your desk for 6 to 8 hours a day, pretty sure you're going to have to mobilize for the rest of the time that you're working.
Right.
For the 4 years that you're going to be working, right? You gotta stay on it. It's not just going to miraculously fix itself, period.
Definitely. That goes for the CrossFitters too. Like we need to incorporate wrist mobility before you do some of these exercises. Especially the biggest thing that I see are front squats when they're looking like, I don't know why my wrist doesn't get back. And the answer isn't to load more weight on it. Like that's not the answer. We got to take the weight away and let's get a better range of motion in our wrist. Your wrist isn't going back like that right now. We need to move it and figure out why.
Yeah. I mean, it's also dosing it in according to what you can tolerate, right? Like I have, again, on my YouTube channel, I have a whole video of introducing that front rack position and things that you need to do before you then approach the bar to start your sets, right? Like what can we do to minimize that impact on our wrists and to be like, oh God, this really hurts. You know, by set 5, I felt fine. Well, had you done all this other shit, you would have felt good for set 1, okay? But yes, there is something to be said about spending time in that position. And a lot of times CrossFitters, like, especially when they're first out of the gate, they're like, wow, this is really uncomfortable. I'm like, I know it is. It's uncomfortable. The more you do it, the more you will be able to tolerate it. That being said, that does not mean that you just load it up and suffer through extreme pain while you're doing those front squats and not do what you need to do in order to then increase the range of motion. Like you still got to put in the work, right? But you will get, just like joint changes happen over time, you will be able to tolerate that position more just because you are accessing that position over and over again, right? So you're forcing yourself to stretch, you're forcing yourself to do the band, but basically the joint mobilization from that barbell. But you're not supposed to just suffer through it, right? Like,
exactly.
Let's fix it. And then you add an explosive clean, and this is one thing I wanted to address with not fucking it up again. Let's make sure that your technique is on point. So if you do not have good cleans and you're catching it low and you're putting your wrist under chronic little micro traumas as you're doing your Olympic lifting, then your technique is going to fuck up your wrist. And no matter all the rehab that you do, if you don't address how you are then cleaning the bar, snatching the bar, you're going to keep fucking it up, right? So you got to, peel back the layers and say, okay, well, what is really affecting my wrist? And then address it so we don't keep fucking it up. All right. And then again, posture, right?
Yeah. We got to pay attention to how we're sitting throughout the day.
Yep. Sitting, standing,
and moving, everything. Keeping that posture with every movement that we do.
Absolutely. Right. Don't fuck up your wrist again by just walking like shit.
Right. Everything's connected.
It is all connected. All right, Doc, what are we doing after the wrist? Should we do
What are
the
we
neck?
doing after the break?
Should we do the
I
neck?
think we should. We got to keep this going. So what's next?
I feel like we need to do the neck. We did the thoracic spine, but there is some stuff that we could do with the neck. We can talk about migraines.
Ooh, tension headaches that a lot of people have been experiencing from all this computer and cell phones and everything, freaking technology.
You could be dehydrated. You could just have a really bad fucked up muscle. All right.
Right.
Okay.
Drink some water.
We will talk about
neck.
that.
We'll talk about the neck next week.
We'll talk
Got
about
a plan.
The neck. Next week, we are talking about the neck. But yes, if you need anything, please reach out to Dr. Arnika at Resilient Spine and me. Tomorrow's the last day for Focus Program sign up. So if you know you need a better way to be in the gym, hit me up. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions. We out.
We are out. Right. Bye, Ty.
Bye.